hope that you've been having a good time at RevCon and our sponsors booths. So right now we have Alex Kracov from Doc and Ross Shanken from Lattice, and they're going to share a few lessons that they've learned over the years and how to build a sales experience that turns champions into buyers. Yeah, take it away, guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vanessa. What up, RevCon? Very excited to be here. Excited to share some of the lessons I learned with Ross building Lattice and now at Doc. So I'm going to share a couple slides to kind of set up the conversation, and then we'll do a fireside chat. So very excited to be here. It's been an awesome conference, and just excited to be a part of the Rev Genius community. So let's get into it. So I'm going to share my slides. All right, perfect. So today we're going to talk about how to build a sales experience that turns your champions into buyers, which is the dream of every sales rep. So why should you listen to me, and a little bit about myself? So I started this company called Doc. We've been at it for a little over a year now, and part of what Doc does is enable buyers, right? And it's all about how do you create a great buyer experience? How do you support champions as they go and talk to other people at the organization? And so it's something I've been thinking a lot about over the last 2 years of my life. So I'm going to share some of the lessons and the research I've found doing that. But my main SaaS experience came at Lattice. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar, but it's a big HR tech company today. But when I joined, I was the third employee. We were pre-revenue, and I sort of went from being the only marketer to running a team of marketing and helping Lattice scale revenue from 0 to 50 million plus. So yeah, a lot of the lessons, and that's where I met Ross and a lot of our overlap there. So quick agenda. I'm going to run through a couple slides about the buyer experience. I will try and move through it fast. Don't want to bore you with another lecture, but we'll talk about the evolution. We'll talk about the mindset and approach you should have as a sales rep. And then we'll get into the really fun part with Ross and talking to him about what he's been learning at Lattice, because he runs the mid-market and enterprise sales teams over there. All right. So this is probably the most obvious statement of all time, but I want to get the heads nodding early, is buyer behavior has really evolved with the rise of the internet, right? The internet has changed the entire way people buy and purchase products. And I think this trend has only accelerated, in the sort of post-COVID world. Hollywood did a good job of sort of depicting sales of the past. If you look at movies like Boiler Room or Wolf of Wall Street, it's usually a sales bro calling up somebody and trying to pull a fast one on them, right? They just call you, catch you in the moment, and it's all about the conversation that happens on the call. But what was really hard, and why you could sort of pull a fast one over, grandma who's calling here, is there wasn't a lot of research available. And I think that's the main thing that has changed for buyers today, is that buyers do so much research. And they come to these sales conversations in a much more informed way than they have in the past. And I sort of bucket this research into 4 different areas. You have search, review sites, social networks, and communities. And we'll kind of touch on each one. So I think every deal in history, at least in modern history, involves some sort of Google search. People are searching for content both at the top of the funnel when they're maybe looking like, why do I need a CRM? But then they're looking as they get closer to making a buying decision around, okay, what is the best CRM software, right? And so everyone is using search. They are looking for information. They are actively searching things. And this is why inbound, demand is such a big channel, on the demand side. And people are using reviews. So these reviews are showing up, obviously in search, but sites like G2 and more old school versions, maybe like a Gartner or Capterra, it becomes a great place to learn about new product categories, but more importantly, see how your solution compares to other folks. And so buyers are sort of more informed than ever before, in terms of like the competitive landscape and who are the different people, like what are the different software solutions that are available out there. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, if you have questions, drop it in the Q&A and we'll answer as we go through this. The other big area is social networks. And, I think we're all on LinkedIn. I assume everyone at this conference is on LinkedIn all of the time. And, buyers are just constantly getting overwhelmed with social proof and different opinions and ads. And I think some of this is happening consciously, where they're clicking and reading something and they're watching it and they're like, okay, yeah, that's how I'm going to think about this software category or this product. But the majority of it is happening subconsciously. They're sort of just getting, propaganda thrown at them about different software products, and it's subconsciously creating people's opinions about that product. And so you just need to keep all of these different things in mind as you're talking to buyers, because this is sort of what happens before they ever talk to you. And then the last piece of this puzzle in my head is communities. And so places like RevGenius become an amazing place for people to ask questions from other folks in the community. It becomes like word of mouth on steroids. And this was a huge channel for us at Lattice when we built like our resources for humans community for HR folks. And a crazy stat I learned as I was sort of working on Doc was buyers only spend 17% of their total buying time talking directly to sales teams. And that's with every sales team. That's with your competitors. That's with everyone. They're probably only spending, I don't do public math, but let's say 5% of the time talking to you as an actual salesperson. And so you have this very limited like window to make your influence on the deal. And we're going to talk through like how you can actually take advantage of that. But a lot of it is sort of putting yourself in the mind of the buyer and understanding that, okay, they're coming a lot more prepared with research. And so you're probably thinking, how do they spend their time? So it's about like 50% is in researching online and then talking to internal folks. And then there's a little bit of offline research, which is probably more of like that word of mouth, talking to friends sort of thing. But you can see very small percentage of time they are actually talking to you and your competitors. And I think this is going to get even smaller over time. With the rise of product-led growth, sales even has less of a time to impact purchase decisions. Buyers just want to get their hands on the product. They want to use the product experience to make those purchasing decisions. And so they're really using sales as sort of a conduit for information. But it's sort of the power of sales is sort of shifting from the seller to the buyer. Now, the good news is one thing that is consistent in this new world is every deal still has a champion, right? Every deal still has a buyer on the other side who you as a salesperson can use your sales tactics to, sort of manipulate in a good way to buying your product, right? And the buyer looks different depending on the size of the organization. If you're trying to sell to Doc today, you'd sell to me, who's probably the end user, the admin, right? I play all of those different roles. But if you sell to a much bigger organization, you're dealing with a lot more stakeholders, right? Big deals have a ton of different stakeholders. You have the lead buyer, you have the decision maker, you have the security guy, you have the business leaders, you have the legal team. You have all these different people that you sort of manage a buying team. And there's so much information that gets traded back and forth. You not only need to manage all these different personalities and stakeholders, and that management just takes such a long, complicated time. I thought Gartner did a pretty good job of showing like the messiness of the buyer journey. But I thought what they did nicely was like simplifying these 4 stages. So problem identification, solution exploration, requirements building, and supplier selection. I think that generally sort of rings true for most sales cycles. And it's your job as a sales rep to support your champion throughout that buying process, right? You need to sort of join arm in arm with them and work with them to sort of guide them through the process and help them solve their problems. And the best sales reps I know have a collaborative mindset. People like Ross really want to help the buyer reach their solution at the end, right? They have a problem and they're coming to you for a solution. I think of it almost like being, you're the river guide in the back of the kayak, and you're sort of, paddling them down river to reach that overall solution and pointing out kind of the different problems and landmines along the way. That's sort of the mindset I think you need to have as a sales rep, as you're authentically trying to help, buyers reach their solution and to solve their problems. I came across this graphic on the internet a few months ago, and I thought it did a great job sort of articulating like what happens when you both oversell a deal, but when you're sort of collaborative in a bad way, when you're sort of overreaching on the problem that you're trying to solve. Like in all SaaS companies, it is about building a relationship with the customer and growing that account over time. And you can see here, like if you oversell and you're not collaborative and you sort of like do a fake job of solving their problems, they're going to churn a couple months later. You might close that deal, but they're not going to be a good long-term customer for you. Whereas in the reverse, if you sort of authentically start by solving one problem And then you can expand that sort of solution problem match over time. You will grow the account, you will generate more enterprise value for your customer, and ultimately, strengthen the business. And so when I think of the different ways to collaborate and how you can, work with these champions, I sort of put it into 4 different buckets, which we will talk about. So the first, as I've been harping on a little bit, is you just need to ask questions to understand the customer's problem. And there's your normal qualification questions, but those are more self-serving to your business, where you're like, hey, is this a good fit? Should I keep spending my time on it? But I think you really want to ask questions to first nail down what are their known problems, what are the things that they're coming to you to actively solve, and they're raising their hand to do that, versus what are the unknown problems. What are the things that, as a rep, you've talked to, hundreds of buyers in this category. What are the things that this buyer is not thinking about that they should be thinking about? And that's a great way for you to sort of show your expertise in the industry, to show you're a consultative, collaborative seller. You also want to get a sense of like how urgent are all these different problems. Is this at the top of their priority stack? Is it at the bottom? That'll help you understand, okay, how they think about this problem set, how you can impact that deal. Another thing is like, how actually solvable is it? Some people I talk to have these like pie in the sky dreams of how you can do something, and it's not quite grounded in reality. And so you want to help, bring them back to what is a realistic solution to solve that problem. And then I think the best thing you can sometimes do as a sales rep is actually recommend a competitor. It's one of the best ways to build trust in a sales cycle, when if you think someone's coming to you for one reason, but you just don't think you're a good fit, you sort of pointing out and being that river guide in the market and sort of showing where the different other options are can build trust and really go a long way. And they might object. They might be like, well, actually, I don't want to do that. I am good about this. And it's a good way for you to sort of not come across as like that sleazy sales rep, as opposed to a real consultative seller, which is what we want. And then once you solve a customer's problem, or understand the customer's problem, you want to share it back to them. And so you can do this in an email, you can do it in a doc workspace, you can do it in a slide deck. There's a lot of different ways to do this. But this is sort of like the classic consultant trick, where you take what the customer's saying to you, share it back to them, put up a mirror back to the customer. And it shows that you're aligned with their problems, that you actually are going to solve them. It's a nice personalized touch. And this is a way that you can sort of go above and beyond what most of the other sales reps are doing in a very small way. Like, this can be very easily templatized, and your customer will start to feel like, okay, these guys get it. They really are going to help me solve this problem. Okay. And we've all been in every sales cycle where prospects have a ton of questions, right? They're going to ask you all sorts of questions about every which way. And I sort of bucket into two areas. So the first is like the why. Why is something important, right? And the classic sort of example here is ROI. What is the ROI of Doc? How do I convince my CFO for that? And the other bucket of question is the what. How does the Salesforce integration work? How are you different than this competitor, right? And you as a sales team and a revenue organization should create both external content and training to help answer these product questions. You need to act like you've answered this question before. That's how you install confidence in your buyer, but it also helps that champion and your buyer take these answers and these questions to other people within the organization who are probably pushing on them to get these answers, right? The CFO is probably bothering the buyer to say, put together your ROI case study for us. And so you as a revenue team need to be prepared for that scenario and act like you've been there before. And the simple exercise I recommend is to sort of map out all your common questions on a customer timeline. And for each one of those little moments, create a piece of content or a training for each of those moments. So, demo is an obvious one, right? After the demo, everyone wants a demo recording. Maybe instead of sharing a custom one, you create a nice one that you share to all your customers. You could do that. Or for how are you different than the competitors, you do competitor battle cards. Or for GDPR compliance, you have a one-sheeter that answers your approach to GDPR, right? So you sort of map out this exercise, map out all the different questions, and then respond with a piece of content or a piece of internal training to help answer those common questions. And then another tactic in another tool in your tool belt is the mutual action plan. And so mutual action plans are a way to sort of guide champions through all the steps in the buying process. And I think there's a spectrum to using mutual action plans, right? for SMB and smaller customers, it's more about next steps. It's more casual. It's saying, hey, here's like the three things you do to get started with Doc and to buy a subscription. Whereas for a big enterprise, it becomes a much bigger process, right? You maybe have a huge evaluation phase. You might have a proof of concept period or free trial. You probably have a proper procurement process with security and legal review and all these things. And so you want to help, especially for more immature buyers, help them sort of poke at like what are the little steps in their buying process. And the more information you can get this up front, the more predictable your sales cycle will be, the more you'll understand when something will close. And one of the cool things, and a little Doc shout out, is you can do mutual action plans within Doc. So this is like a screenshot of our mutual action plan product. Another great way to enable your buyers is through what we call a digital sales room. And so it's basically a single place. Think of it like a private website between you and your prospects. And it's a place to organize all the different content you're sharing. So instead of content being like lost in email threads and sort of all over the place, you have one single link that you can share with your champion, and they can pass that around to all the other people in the organization to say, hey, I want to buy software A, here's why. And this gives you a way as a seller to sort of control the experience and the things that are being shared across that organization, and get analytics on when it did get shared. So these digital sales rooms, include like your demo video, security review, mutual action plans, PDFs that answer different product questions, pretty much whatever you think is important for your champion to go past to other people in the organization. And then I think the last piece I'll mention is big deals require personalization. To close enterprise deals, you need to show that you are spending time and you care about them. And so little things like showing the logo, sharing back the success criteria, these little things go a long way. And I think of it as like an 80-20 rule, right? Like 80% of what you're doing should be probably templatized and the same from customer to customer. But that last little bit of 20% of personalization will make them feel special, will make them feel cared for, and make them feel like they're a priority for you and your business. So that is the end of the slides. Hopefully this was helpful to sort of set up the conversation. If you want to learn more about Doc, go to our website, doc.us. We have a bunch of content in our library. We have a great sales guide I'd recommend that you go check out. And I'm always happy to keep talking about this stuff. Email me, alex@doc.us. But now, for my favorite part, we're going to talk to my buddy Ross. And so let me stop sharing and pull up my question list. All right. What's up, Ross?
Alex, can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you great. So I'll do an intro that you deserve. So excited to interview Ross. Ross is currently the director of sales, leading both the corporate and strategic segments at Lattice. So in plain English, that means he runs the mid-market and the enterprise sales team. And for people who don't know, Lattice is a people success platform that has companies like Slack, Pinterest, and Flexport as customers. It was valued at over $3 billion and actually has the revenue to back that valuation. And Ross has had an amazing journey as a sales rep. He started as a mid-market AE like 4+ years ago and rose through the ranks to be the first dedicated enterprise rep, then scaled and managed the enterprise team, and now runs all of mid-market and enterprise at Lattice. And before Lattice, he had a number of different sales roles and was actually the founder of a parking app that was acquired by Passport Parking. So he has a very unique perspective as both a founder and a sales. So welcome, Ross. Excited to chat with you.
Yeah, Alex, good to see you, man. Good to see you.
I know, it's been a minute. It sucks we don't get to work in the same office anymore.
I know. Well, always a seat for you to come back, man. We miss you dearly.
I know, I'll come hang. But let's get into it. So let's start with like a more timely question. I think the macro environment today is very different than it was a couple years ago. And so, how do you think sales changes in this sort of macro climate where budgets are getting cut, people are reducing software spend? How do you think about sort of changing the sales process to account for that?
Yeah. Couple of things. One, patience. I don't think people are making decisions as quickly as they used to, especially when, we saw this boom, somewhat last year and the year prior, where there's just a lot of excitement and easier and faster purchasing processes. We're not seeing that quite today. Much more patient, a lot more buyer due diligence. the statistic you had up there was really interesting, that like 17% of their time is only spent with, the sales team. Makes sense. Like, buyers are coming in really, really informed on, the top players in the space, like what the differentiators are between you and the others before you even have your initial conversation, which is great. I actually enjoy it. We're having really, really sharp evaluations that I find, enable the sales team to differentiate throughout the evaluation process, whether that's from differentiating on like the product and the offering, or differentiating from, the service, the people, and the support. There's many different ways that we're seeing our sales team here succeed.
Yeah, I think one of the nice parts about having a strong product like Lattice too is you get to, like, the power of your platform, and you can be patient and make sure that this is actually a good solution to solve their problem. And going to sort of some of the things that I touched on in the presentation, like, when it comes to champions, how do you think about sort of identifying who the champion is in a sales deal, or how do you like turn somebody into a champion? How do you think about that?
Yeah. I think it's definitely safe to say, and I'm getting an alert that my internet is unstable, and I think that happens every time I get the CEO. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, it looks good for me. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I think it's important for like everyone to realize that the initial conversation, the person that you have on your like on your calls or your Zoom calls, doesn't necessarily mean that they are your champion or able to be the champion. Champions, how at least I define it, is like individuals that are willing and able, to go to bat and to make change. And so there's a lot of opportunities throughout your evaluation process where you need to identify if they're doing the things that they said they will do. Are they bringing in the right people? Or do they have access to information that you're asking questions about? And then can they, are they able to get this across the finish line? Enabling champions is, one of the things that we certainly do fairly well here. We have a great, culture and sales team, but, we really treat everyone like family. We really treat everyone as someone that we want to spend time with. We make everyone, feel the special individual that they are. And, outside of just the toggles and switches and the bells and whistles, like, people really want to interact and purchase from people. We're working on multi-year engagements where we're going to be transforming, their people and their culture. And so they need to have a lot of comfortability working with, not just you, the sales rep, who's the first person that they start working with, but you're a reflection on the rest of the company, like what their customer support team will look like, what their implementation managers will look like, their services team will look like, et cetera. And so having that, really strong first impression kind of goes a long way throughout their entire customer journey with you.
Do you think it's like charisma? Like, is it just like Ross's charisma that gets people excited to work with you and treat with family? Or is it more of like the science, maybe like the process and the information and the problem solving? Like, how do you think about like personality versus maybe like real value being in sort of, building that relationship with the champion?
Yeah, I think you need to identify who this individual is and really mirror how they want to receive information, right? There's some champions that we've, enabled where they kept us at an arm's distance, but like they kept accomplishing the things they wanted to accomplish. They were willing to bring in the right people, but they didn't want to interact with us the same way others did. And so making sure that you're tailoring your sales process to the individual as well as their purchasing process is really important. I think charisma only works for certain people that, I guess, receive the charisma positively. But there are others in certain industries that like being very happy-go-lucky, charismatic, like maybe doesn't, reflect as well. And so you need to definitely, treat every single individual in, specifically to how they like, receive their information.
Yeah, I've seen you do that too, where it's like some people you're texting back and forth and, going crazy with them and like iMessage and doing that, versus others you're, like much more like formal with them. And it's like much more of this email process. And I think, I don't know, it's a good example I can remember of us working together where you really sort of matched your style to sort of the buyer's style. And I'm sure that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm a big fan of texting. I think everyone should ask for it and indicate that texting is just a lot faster and easier way of communicating. And if you're able to, open that mode of communication, you're able to really test and enable this champion. Like, are they able to get on the phone with you that same day? Are they able to get on the phone with you in a couple of hours? We're like, hey, I have a quick question I want to run past you. Do you have 5 today? And if they're saying yes, all great signs moving, the right momentum for you. If they say no, it's not a great sign.
Yeah. All right. So you're doing enterprise deals and these really long sales cycles. I mean, I imagine it's 1 to 2 years, if not more, for some of these big enterprises. Like, how do you think about engaging this champion through this very long buying process? Like, what does that sort of look like month over month? How do you keep them engaged? How do you sort of keep them on track? How do you know that you're like not wasting your time? Like, how do you just think about sort of guiding that champion through the buying process?
Yeah. You kind of, first you want to understand, who the individual you're working with is. Have they done this before? Have they purchased a software like this? Have they implemented something like this? Then you want to understand the stakeholders that are involved. Who is this initiative coming from? Who else will need to get involved later? Once we accomplish this step, what happens next? And understand their buying process. But I always, recommend to come with suggestions, such as like, hey, what I've seen be successful is we're going to want to loop in your director of, your VP of, so they can see A, B, and C. I think the difference with an enterprise sales cycle that's different from, an SMB sales cycle is you're just going to see a lot more stakeholders. And if you don't get them involved, it's a red flag. And so you need to offer, ask, suggest to get them involved. And if they say, hey, I can run this myself, certainly a red flag. Have I seen it happen? Sure. But it's the exception and not the rule.
Love it. One audience question that I think is relevant to what we're talking about right now is from Juan Arcilla. I think I'm saying that right. He asked, how do you recommend involving multiple stakeholders and champions without risking diluting the relationship with your main champion? How do you think about that?
Totally. I have more questions, but since I can only chat with you, Alex, I'm just going to make some assumptions here. Great opportunity for you to introduce other stakeholders on your side too. Whether that be manager, director, VP. It's very common for us to make sure we're getting those executive connections from our side to their side. In our world, we have a solution that is really transforms the entire company. It touches every single person. And so making sure we have buy-in from the top down is really, really important. If you don't have buy-in from the top down, it's very rarely a real evaluation, real initiative to begin with. So very much recommend, if you're bringing in other stakeholders on your side, making offerings such as, we have advisory services teams, we have solutions consultants. That's where we're going to make the suggestions to bring in their other stakeholders too.
And so tactically, does it just mean like you're setting up a bunch of different meetings between different people in an organization? Like the CMOs meet, the CEOs meet, this advisory person comes in. Like, is it just a lot?
If that happened, like if the CEOs met and the CMOs met, that's a very healthy deal. Everyone is taking time away from their day-to-day to go meet with us to hopefully transform, some of their business. But no, oftentimes, like, we're going to be identifying with the champion what the next steps will be. We're going to indicate like, hey, we're going to want to bring in this person. Hopefully you can bring in this person as well. They'll do a quick introduction via email prior. Really excited to meet you, here to chat afterwards. And the goal is really to allow and enable them to have their own open line of communication, where they can, kind of mitigate any risks, build that trust that's really needed. I know that was really helpful for us as we were moving up market, and we didn't at the time, Alex, this better than everyone else. We didn't really have too many upmarket customers. So we did have to bring in, a lot of different stakeholders on our side to help, drive that deal forward.
Yeah. Do you want to transition to talking about moving
up? If that's
upmarket?
all right. Yeah. I am curious, Alex. I know you witnessed it here at Lattice, and you witnessed it with many different companies. Moving up market is certainly a challenge for many different organizations. For you, like, what is typically the signal that your product or your company or sales team is ready to start moving from, the SMB motion into enterprise?
Yeah. So I think pretty much every startup picks an ICP to build for, right? And most software companies are starting with like a small, segment, like other startups, right? There's only a couple examples I can think of. Workday is the main one, which was like, all right, we're just going to go straight up market. It's very hard to do. And so I think most of the time people are starting selling to smaller companies. And then what happens is naturally you start to get pulled up where you have bigger companies coming in who want to use your tool if you build X, Y, and Z, right? There's a lot of things, and like classic examples, boring examples are like single sign-on, admin permissions, things like that. You start to get all these feature requests that big companies want, localization, things like that. And so you start, like, as that happens, you start to realize, okay, there is some demand in like the stretch of our ICP. And let's say you're selling to 200 person companies or 50 to 200 person companies. Maybe you have a bunch of 300 person companies coming in and trying to like pull you up market. And so that's going to naturally happen. And then you want to like look for that on the fringes. The other thing is strong net retention rates for your mid-market customers. So are you delivering a great product experience for like those slightly bigger segments, like your biggest customers? And then once that starts happening, you can sort of more deliberately move up market. So I think to summarize, like it's first like a natural extension, you'll start moving up. And then once you start to see kind of those smoke signals of it working, then you can like go hire enterprise sales reps and really start to make it like a company-wide effort. And I'm curious, Ross, like from your perspective, what's the biggest difference between like an SMB sale versus an enterprise sale, if you were to sort of summarize that for folks?
Yeah, I think at first it depends on the size and stage of your company. I remember back in the day, Alex, like, the SMB deals were just as challenging as the enterprise deals are today. Now that's, just a little bit different. Our product maturity is much different, but the SMB sales, you're typically going to have, fewer stakeholders. You're going to have easier access to the decision makers, to, directors, VPs, C levels, who are looking to make those decisions on their own for their team or for their organization. When you're moving into enterprise, you just have a lot more voices and opinions, a lot more use cases, a lot more specifics. You need to not just be able to navigate that and solution, what they're looking to accomplish, but internally on our side, very rarely do you really want to do that alone. You really want to bring in, any different or any assistance or help that can help encourage your win rate for your team. Sales is very much like a team sport. There is, us who's, really seen as like that quarterback, but we got to call the plays. We got to call in the right people. We got to make sure we're running and executing it properly. So in enterprise, we're typically going to see 5 or 6 of us on our side touch these deals, and we're going to see 6 to 8 of them on their side at minimum before we're even going to become partners.
Love it. And I know Lattice is such a big tops-down implementation, and we've touched on this a little bit, but there's a lot of change management that happens across an organization, right? It's like the HR person wants to buy it. They might be your champion, but then it's like you got to get the managers on board and the C-suite and all these different people. Like, how do you think about that change management problem? How do you make the champion feel good about that and be able to sort of, because they got to help navigate that internally. You don't work internally. Like, how do you think about that when it comes to the Lattice sale?
Yeah, it also depends where they are at in their in their philosophy of what this is looking to accomplish and what you're looking to gain from it. But I have to tell you, Alex, we've gone through so many sales cycles where we got the HR team involved. These are our buyers. We sell to HR. We got everyone really excited. They were like, "Yeah, I can't wait to do this." And then it got squashed. We're like, "Why did it get squashed?" Like, "Oh, well, they didn't want to do it." I was like, "Oh, I thought this was an initiative of everyone's." Like, "No, just our initiative." And so we've learned by trial and error that we got to figure out who's actually driving this and whose buy-in do we have. And if we don't have their buy-in, how do we get it? What do we need to do? And sometimes that is getting a lot of manager buy-in and stakeholders. So we are doing demonstrations from the ground up, making sure that everybody is bought in, that we are doing this, or we are looking to do this. Here's how this is going to help. And are you a promoter or a contractor or detractor from executing this for our business goals? I would say the more that you're able to work with your champion, your coach, your economic buyer to understand where they are internally, such as their decision-making process, their philosophy, the easier your job will be, and partnering with them in their evaluation.
Makes a lot of sense. So let's pretend I'm an AE. I just got promoted to the enterprise segment. I'm on Ross's team. Like, how's my life going to change? What kind of lessons can you share to sort of shortcut my learning and help me ramp a little bit faster?
Yeah. If you're on Ross's team, you're gonna love your life, Alex.
Yeah.
Nothing but fun over here. Crushing quotas, and nothing but laughs and giggles. But how's your life going to change from like a day-to-day perspective? Right? Your sales cycle lengths are going to increase. Maybe 2x, maybe 3x, and that's probably the biggest change for a lot of these reps that are moving into a larger role or getting promoted. And you did this because you were really successful in your previous role, so everyone believes and is confident in your ability to be successful in the next role. But that change of the sales cycle length is going to be challenging on your psyche. And so we indicate your psyche management is something that you really need to make sure you're taking care of. And you can't really have the same expectations as you did in a shorter sales cycle. There's going to be more decision makers. There's going to be more meetings. There's going to be more stakeholders on both sides. But I would say if there's like one piece of advice is, make sure you're setting the expectations that this is no longer the 20-day, the 30-day, the 45-day sales cycle, and we're seeing 60, 70, 80, 100 days. So you got to be patient, making sure you're moving the ball forward with the right people.
Love it.
You mind if I ask another question, Alex?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Just kind of moving into it. So I know for reps that are moving from SMB into enterprise, moving up market is certainly a challenge for in many organizations. If they start lower and grow. Given you have so much experience in the marketing world, like what are you seeing, you needing to change from your marketing to go up market?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and probably a very long answer, but I'll give the quick highlights here. So I would separate into two buckets, right? Like your demand gen strategy is going to change, but also your product marketing, positioning, and brand needs to change. So I'll start with that side first. Like, you sort of need to start angling your brand towards the enterprise. And there's a lot of these little micro optimizations you can make, like sort of across all of your content, whether it's your website, your slide deck, your PDFs, all the things you're creating, to sort of angle your brand towards the enterprise. So the simplest answer is put more enterprise logos on your website. There's a chicken and egg problem there, but you sort of start to put like, all right, your biggest customers on the website. And as soon as you get one really good enterprise-ish customer, it's your first case study, it's your marquee customer, and so on and so forth. Another little tactic is setting up like a solutions page for the enterprise. And if you go look up any big company who has a solutions page for the enterprise, these pages never actually talk about the product. It is all enterprise buzzword bingo. It is global and security and all these little things that enterprises care about that an SMB doesn't. And so these simple little things can just make you feel like a big company, and it's table stakes. Then from a product marketing perspective, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that the product marketing can do to sort of help with the enterprise, competitive battle cards for sort of the upmarket folks, and so on and so forth. Org maps, persona cards, right? Instead of just dealing with one type of buyer, you're dealing with what does the CFO think? What does the CEO think? And you need to help the sales team sort of think through all those different personas. So that's on that side. And then I think, on the enterprise, like demand gen side, I would argue that a lot of the SMB tactics still work for enterprise, where people are still searching, people are still on LinkedIn, right? Every buyer acts generally the same, but you need to be a little bit more of a sniper. You need to do account-based marketing. You need to be really thoughtful about, here are the target lists that I'm going after, and really sort of build multi-channel campaigns that go after a bunch of enterprise buyers. So at Lattice, we did this with a series of basically building big lists, sending direct mail, running targeted ads, targeted emails, putting billboards around different people's offices and things like that. And so there's sort of this two-pronged approach to move it up market. So yeah,
I remember those billboards, Alex. Those were great billboards.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. All right, we got 5-ish minutes left. Let me answer a couple audience questions, and feel free to add a couple more in the chat, and then we'll kind of close out with a few questions. So Eddie Sand asked, can Doc be used for our main sales pipeline? yes, Doc can be used to manage the entire customer lifecycle. So on your sales side, customer success side as well, it can be used for any segment of your business. The template would change though. So for an enterprise business, it's a much longer template, a deeper mutual action plan, for example. Whereas for the SMB side of things, it'd be a much like simpler template, a little more transactional. And then
Yeah, you mind if I touch on that, Alex, a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, great question, Eddie, and kind of a firsthand experience of how we're leveraging it here. Doc is a great opportunity when you're seeing these buyers obtain so much information without being face to face or without the salesperson. Right, 83% of their time is spent, doing their own research or their own information. When you're able to create this hub, such as Doc, it gives you a great opportunity to see like what are they clicking in, what are they finding interesting. You're being able to tailor that to their solutions too. And so when you want to start to identify, is this person I'm with becoming a champion, you can see what their interaction looks like, with all of the content that you've produced. And you can get in front of a lot of the questions they probably already have based on what they're looking into. And so we'll know, based on, what the prospects or customers are looking into, what are they finding most interesting, what we should bring top of mind. Maybe we fail to get a next step, but we see them gravitating towards our Doc. We know that it's a great opportunity for us to reach back out, give them a call, understand like, hey, just saw you were looking at A, B, and C. Why don't we walk through that together? It's a great opportunity, Eddie.
Love it. Thanks, Ross.
Sure.
And then a quick question to answer. Tom asked, Cunningham asked, what are we using to create your digital sales room? And it's Doc. So yeah, the company I'm working on. So yeah, go to doc.us. You can give it a try. We have a free trial. All right. We got only a couple minutes left. Let's end with a closing question. So Ross, you've gone through like amazing personal development at Lattice, right? Like you went from an AE to a manager to a manager of managers, and it's really hard to keep up with startups, and you've done it. You've like kept up with the company growth curve and not only survived but thrived. And so I'm curious, like, how did you handle this transition? What advice would you give to other people who work at startups who are trying to keep up with the company growth? And how did you sort of change your approach along the way?
Yeah, I like this question, Alex. Thanks. For me personally, right, like this is going to be an opinion, not a I don't know, a full-on suggestion. But in my opinion, I like to remain curious, and I like to remain, kind of optimistic. And so when organizations want to take a bet or want to give you an opportunity, I'm someone that likes to say yes. I want to, go to bat for the organization and go to bat and bet on myself. I have to say, though, when you're jumping into whatever role it may be, you're going to feel imposter syndrome. You're going to feel like you're not prepared. You don't know exactly what to do, but you wouldn't be put in that role if, your manager, your team, the execs didn't, feel and have a lot of faith in you. So for me, I know I don't have the answers or, I'm not the perfect, manager quite yet, but continuing to learning from others, seeking out mentorship is really important to me. And I know it's been fulfilling and rewarding so far. So even the next role, I know I'll still remain curious throughout my journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ross. It was really fun talking to you. And thank you everyone at RevCon for listening in and taking time out of your day. Ross, where can people find you if they want to follow up with you?
Let's see. Emails, ross@lattice.com. LinkedIn, just type in the name you're seeing here, Ross Shanken. Love to connect. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Yeah, and you can find me too, LinkedIn, same name over there. I got a little blog going. It's my last name, Kracov.co. You can read some marketing stories. And yeah, go check out Doc, shameless plug, where I think we're building something really special and cool and would love for you to get started. We have a free trial and you can play around with it yourself. So it's dock.us. And thank you so much.